So apartment list, Matt, more than 2 million households dissolved, then reappeared.
That's right.
During the pandemic.
So I was kind of hinting at this when we were talking about the Real Page article. I think it pairs well with it. This report on household formation covers the pandemic-related dip in household formations with some additional contextual information that really kind of pulled me in. Yes, you could read the headline and be off on your merry way, but the details on behind this sudden drop and equally sudden recovery might explain household formation trends more generally. You can see how the household composition in the last half century has shifted. There's a graph here that shows how nuclear families went from a large percentage, the largest share in 1970, and really started decreasing. Now it's the third largest, maybe it's 20%, with married couples at 22%, and the largest share now is single people, and it hasn't changed much since then, except for this little dip here. One of their main points was that this shift in household formation, at least at initial moments of the pandemic, was largely due to single person households, which are, as I said, the largest cohort. Single person households were in the negative from March till October. So it's that line graph above. So there's a line graph here that shows from 2018 to 2022, and you see a large dip right at right around
the pandemic. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah, household formation just dropped off.
Yeah. So who are these single person households? And well, it's the young people, says Apartment List. Gen Z renters experienced the most dramatic swings, dropping more in mid-year 2020 and rapidly growing ever since at a rate that far outpaces other age groups. They dipped down lower and they recovered higher than other age groups. I have to give it to Apartment List here because it's rare to see such a simplified and easy to understand story that's backed up so nicely with data. Apartment List argues that these Gen Z renters went back home for a little while during the pandemic, and then after October of 2020, they started going back to renting their own apartments. It makes sense to me on the individual level. You can see the increase in nuclear family households right as single person households were going down. And then once single person households went up, nuclear family households decreased. They went back to living with their parents. Then they went back to living on their own. And the same thing happens with, I'm living with a child. Those went up. And then living with... And then they went down after, when the single family went up.
And I think everyone watching and listening has a dozen anecdotes of where they're like, that makes sense. I mean,
exactly.
Like half of New York City went home, moved back in with their parents, and then 6 months later they're like, I'm going back to New York or moving to Miami. Or somewhere else.
Go to Tampa and Boise.
Exactly.
So this is interesting, and it does seem like people went back to live with their parents. Not necessarily were they becoming roommates, which I think is understandable in the pandemic sense.
Yeah.
In that, you'd rather hole up and be sick with your family than with someone that you
some roommate.
Not know. Yeah. So
makes sense.
I thought that was very interesting. It does back up Real Page's point about the fact that we're not seeing a whole lot of roommates. I think if you scroll down even on this study, you'll see a chart that says where roommates are, and it's not pretty. It's in the negative really throughout. So we're really seeing a decrease in the amount of roommate households.
This will be an interesting stat to continue to track.
Yeah.
Over the coming months, for sure. Does how that roommate number increase? But this roommate number having declined, that pairs pretty well with the Real Page report.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that it even anecdotally, and I guess anecdotes are truth now because we've got these evidence that may prove it. But anecdotally, I've heard of someone that they just couldn't work from home. During the pandemic, they were in the living room, someone else was in the living room. They're working there. They don't have to hole up in their bedroom all day. Yeah. So if they can live alone, they have a nice office, and that works a whole lot better than trying to argue with your roommate.
Something I find interesting, and I haven't gotten a good answer, is this aggregate change in renter-owner households since January 2020, and there's a drop off on renter households in the early on in 2020, but and then it kind of gained steam. Is this purple? That's where it's an increase of renter households map. So, but what's interesting is even with losing maybe 5.5 million renters just over a couple months in 2020, occupancy rates went up.
Yeah. I think that it's because I think the pandemic related trends and the recovery from, the pandemic drops are coincidental with these larger scale shifts, especially, kind of when it comes to these Gen Z renters. They were coming of age almost exactly the point when the pandemic happened, and then they're all going to want to go and get jobs and move out on their own, and they're doing that, and so it's increasing, it's really accelerating pre-existing trends of recovery from the pandemic.
So it's the renter households could be declining, but instead of having a bunch of 2-bedroom households, 2 people living together, it's more singles, and so you can have a total number of households, but there's more just single individuals, so it's increasing the occupancy. So I'm still trying to trying to square losing renters, and on that graph doesn't show a major increase in renter households, yet at the same time, physical occupancy is at an all-time high.
Yeah,
where are the where are the new people coming from? It's not showing up on that report.
Yeah, it could. I guess. The only thing is if that's measuring full population rather than the amount of households. But yeah, I'll have to look into that.
It'd be good something that we should figure out on for the next week's report.
Yeah, I'll follow up.